G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL Fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We talk about the lesser knowns and the guys that are going to bring value to your Keeper League teams. As per usual, I'm joined by my co-host Kaes. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. It was good to have footy back on the weekend. It was such a treat.
Yep, Marsh Series, I almost called it NAB Cup then, and I don't think it's been NAB Cup in for about 5 years, I reckon now. So, I don't know, Ansett Cup, whatever they bloody call it. No, it was good to have it back. I watched every game on the weekend. I just made sure I was on the couch and got around it and got my head in the game. Still have, I don't know, if I still know what's going to happen in the season or what's going to, if I've got a better idea or a worse idea what's actually going to happen in the season because there's so many variables in the pre-season game.
It's tough, but it's actually nice to speak about current footy and not just, our gut feels in our statistical analysis, I suppose, going forward. So it's always good when you can actually just watch some footy, figure out what teams are doing, see who's actually kind of had a good pre-season, see who might come to fruition for this year and, see just who might be that diamond in the rough in 2020.
Absolutely. So tonight we're going to talk about, I guess we're going to review the Marsh Series. But just before we do that, I'm glad we got this kombucha on hand here, Kaes, just because we're going to do a lot of speaking tonight. We really need to wet the whistle to keep our vocal cords lubricated. Yeah. So we're on the, what are we on? The Remedy Kombucha Organic Switchel, which is a blood orange flavour tonight.
Not too bad. I quite like the blood orange. This might be quite nice with a gin maybe.
Going to do a taste test for us, mate?
It's like a healthy... San Pellegrino Aranciata Rosa
I reckon it's like a healthy Fanta. It tastes like Fanta, but not as sugary. I'm actually starting to come around to the actual the not sweetness of it, I guess. You don't get the artificial sweetener flavour as much as you get in the diet soft drinks. So,
that's true.
Yeah.
Delicious drop.
We'll stop talking about our product that we've got on the table because we're not getting paid for it, but they've sent us some freebies, so thank you, Remedy Kombucha, for that, for providing us with some drinks for the show. So anyway, last week, I guess we're talking about a bit of news and things like that, we tried to get Bad Dreams on board, tried to get Port Adelaide on board to let Bad Dreams record their theme song or redo it. So keep tweeting those videos that we sent out, keep tweeting Port Adelaide and Koshi and try to help us get it happening.
I feel there's a bit of groundswell coming with that though. There's a few whispers around the fact that we might be on the track or something.
Yeah.
But it's been a big week for Port. They've had to basically pull out of China this week. They've signed a new deal with MG, which I didn't even know were operational for the last 10 years. I thought they'd folded, but these brands that want to associate with Port, they are cutting edge.
They might not have had time to, organise a recording session for Bad Dreams, so that's probably why it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. So I think next week probably it should happen, I think.
Definitely. We'll Port have the week off this week, so they've got plenty of stuff to take over.
Maybe they'll get it happening, so I'm sure it's going to happen soon. Okay, also, the case, we lodged our keepers for the Podcasters League, didn't we, this week?
We did, yeah. So on Friday night, we got 10 teams in our kind of Podcasters League, so there's a few guys from various pods around the fantasy community. So we've all put in our 20 keepers. So we had 4 squads of 40 last year. This is the second year we're going into it. So the first time we've actually had to put a keeper list forward. So everyone's put their 20 keepers through. So day by day, I'm kind of dissecting all of the keeper league lists, kind of asking the coaches on their feedback while they made a few decisions. I give my take on a few. It's been interesting. So we've had 2 up so far. Mine's gone up yesterday, and Sam from DT Keeper League, he's been up today. So he made a big call of keeping Jesse Hogan. So he wanted to go with Hogan. If it was me, I'd probably err on the side of caution and say no. Pool. So it's interesting to see how different coaches kind of go about their things, and it's good because you get feedback. So kind of what this just quickly, I think this Keeper League thing, this list kind of thing makes a lot of sense if you join our Gold members group, because you can basically do what I'm doing, put your list of keepers up there going, I'm thinking of picking these 20 out of 40. What do you guys reckon? And, I got a good comment on my article yesterday. Potentially they made a case of keeping Darcy Tucker because he's got forward status.
Yep.
We know forward pool is very shallow this year, over someone like David Swallow. Probably a thing I didn't even think of really, when I was doing the keeper list. So good to get feedback from like-minded people. So hopefully these little articles give you a little bit of help going forward and when you choose your keeper lists for this season.
All right, so check those out at keeperleaguepod.com.au. But I guess we'll get stuck into some news from the weekend. So nothing major here, but Ben McAvoy came off with a corky. The reason I've got it even in the list is we didn't really get to see what was actually going to happen with our ruck setup. So something else we're going to have to monitor over the next fortnight.
And it really really skews those Segler points as well, because it's going to make the case that he's the number one ruckman now. But McAvoy literally played. Like, I watched the first 5 minutes of that game, and I saw him go down. So it's crazy how. We kind of hope this game might have shed some light on what might be happening with Hawthorn this year, but we are still none the wiser going into the second week of the Marsh Series.
Just some other quick ones. Rory Sloane was icing his hip, but I don't think there was too much damage there. There's a lot of ice actually thrown out in the game now that I think about it in all the games. Marley Williams, though, suspended, I think this week. For
2 weeks.
2 weeks, for the start of the season. So that could open some doors for some young North Melbourne players, especially with the injury list they've got at the moment. It looks pretty dire there. So we'll have to keep an eye on them over the next couple of weeks to see who's likely to come in and play that runner, that defender role, I think, as well, coming into North Melbourne's side in round 1. So, interesting to see there. It might open some doors for, say, someone like Paul Ahern, who probably wasn't best 22 in the first place. I'm going to talk about Paul Ahern a bit tonight, actually, because I'm in love with that guy, but I don't think he's going to be up to scratch this season. But anyway, we'll move on.
I don't know why you are, but, you can talk about that later.
All right, let's get into the Marsh round 1 review. All right, on to St Kilda versus Hawthorn for the Thursday night game last week. We're going to talk about a few players that are, I guess, probably keeper league relevant that stood out a bit, and we'll just analyse their game. So, first player I'm going to talk about from St Kilda is Tim Membry. So, he had a big game. He was absolutely dominant playing up forward there, but on the back of that, I think it's probably too early to get excited about that. I actually got a few messages after the game saying, do I keep Membry now? And I was like, just, pump the brakes, guys. Just wait up. Because looking at the Hawthorn defence, it wasn't great. So McAvoy was supposed to be playing as a key defender. They had that Damon Greaves back there as well. Frost played and he looked pretty... he looked like Frost. He looked like Frost. Yeah. Played there as well. Then, with... King and Ryder playing, though, it could actually be a sign of them taking a bit of heat off up forward as well, because they haven't really played with those two before. I know they lost Josh Bruce to the Dogs, so that kind of gets rid of one, but maybe just having that extra person up there takes a bit of the heat off. Do you think, Kaes? What do you reckon?
Yeah, quite likely. Membry's always been a very, very good player, and it wasn't until I did a bit of research on him this week that he's actually quite young still too, so he's only like mid-20s. So he's kind of one that... He's never going to be a keeper, but he's one that you could take, mid-draft to kind of chalk up your forward ranks. And as we know, they're weak this year. So he's definitely one that's on my radar as like a mid to late draft pick as a guy who's just going to play every week. And if St Kilda actually do improve, and hopefully they will with, quality players like Brad Hill coming into their side, they'll be able to hit him a lot better than they have in the past. So potentially should be kicking a few more goals this year. And, it could be that guy who's a 75, 80 average forward, with kind of, you're not paying a price for him when it comes to draft day. Yeah,
he's definitely one of those players that you take if you're struggling to have best 22 type players in your side and you need some cover or just the guy to fill out your last forward spot. I think he's the perfect candidate for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Dan Butler playing his first game for St Kilda, or his first, kind of game. You know what I mean? 85 points for the game. Started forward, had 5 tackles for the game, which really bumped his numbers up. I think he's going to be resigned to that forward role. I think you're going to see blokes like Dunstan, Billings, Gresham having more runs in the midfield. He's kind of brought in to kind of stay at home a bit more. But could be a handy, I reckon, 70-plus average forward in the forward line. What do you reckon?
One that I would be actually quite keen to take this year. Obviously, coming from Richmond, tough side to crack. I think he's got the opportunity now at St Kilda. Probably replaces someone like Dean Kent, who played a fair bit last year. Obviously, looks like Butler's a much better pressure player, a bit more speed, great tackling. So I reckon definitely one you could take late in a draft too without too many issues.
Yeah, and moving on, we'll take a look at Luke Dunstan. He had 88 points. He's almost too good for the pod, actually, because he did average over 80 last season, I think. But we thought we'd just talk about him because I wasn't really sure where he was going to play this season. So he had 88 points, went at 1.1 point per minute. So for 100 minutes, it's 110 points, essentially. Nice. He was everywhere throughout the game, though. He rotated midfield and forward. Look, he's never the most consistent player, but there's some good signs there. But again, we're expecting a few more St Kilda midfielders back on that one. So another one you've got to really pump the brakes on a little bit too.
He's a really, really tough one as a keeper proposition. Like, especially if you're keeping not many players, is he one you take the roll the dice on? I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
he's really borderline keeper for me.
The owner in our league is really shopping him around at the moment,
and rightfully so, because he's a real risk for reward. You could keep him and he could end up averaging 100, or you could keep him and he might not even be playing AFL. So he's a tough one. I can't get a read on, and I suppose when when teams aren't playing their strongest side in the Marsh Series, you're never going to get a good read on it. Potentially St Kilda might go in full strength in their second game. Hopefully they do, because at least you get a bit of a feel for who's actually in their best 22.
Yeah, for sure. Hunter Clark, a lot of hype about him in the pre-season. Only scored 69 points, but attended 7 centre bounces. Mostly played in defence, so he did have a goal playing in the midfield a little bit there as well. 8 points per minute. Sorry, 8 points per minute. 0.8 points per minute, which isn't bad. I don't think it was his best game that we've seen. I still have faith in him this season. I think him kind of playing a lot of time in defence is just really good to see, just because you're hopefully he's going to keep his defender status for a long time, and you expect him to now with the additions to the St Kilda midfielder. What do you think of him?
Well, I didn't really see the game, so I'm kind of leaning on you for some expertise here. So obviously there's been massive hype of Hunter Clark in the pre-season. If you were an owner or whatever, or even if you weren't an owner and you were keen on him after that game, what did you think? Would you be all guns in, like everyone's kind of
I'm still excited about him. He wasn't the greatest performance by him, but he's still definitely, he's a young player. He's going to have ups and downs throughout the season. You're not going to, I think if you're expecting, him to come out and say average 90 plus, you're probably dreaming a little bit, but I reckon the 80 plus is definitely doable for him this season. He should be a pretty handy defender.
Yep. Now this is one I want you to tell me about. The big general. I traded him into my home keeper league a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Ruck forward status. The 5 minutes of the game I saw before I had to work on Thursday night, he looked like an absolute behemoth out there. Did he absolutely set the world on fire?
Not set the world on fire, but he looked handy for Hawthorn. So he had 3 goals and then 2 behinds as well. So he could have had a bag there. This contributed pretty largely to his scoring. I'm not sure if he's going to be, kicking those goals every week, but he looked to be playing deep forward. Only had the 1 hit out as well. So if you're relying on the hit out numbers, it's probably a role he's not going to play. Like he probably got made to play a bit more at GWS, and that's why he probably found himself out of the side, because he wasn't doing it very well. I think they're going to play him as a sole forward this season, and hopefully he can get a few snags each week, because that'll contribute well to his scoring.
Cool. And your boy, Chad Wingard.
Yeah, my ex-boy. Still is my boy deep down.
Still
a place in my heart for him. But yeah, look, he scored 53, but he also only had 51% time on ground. So went at a points per minute of 0.8 when you add up the numbers there, the minutes on the ground. So he looked like he was mostly being used in the midfield too, which is really good signs, because I'm big on him this year, because I think he's one that you could probably get a bit cheaper in a trade or pick him up a bit later in the draft, just because of the average last year, which I think was largely affected by the injuries. And a lot of talk about, does he play midfield, does he play forward? I personally think he plays midfield. I think it's his best position, kind of always has been since even back at Port. Younger days he did play at forward a lot, but towards the end of his days at Port, and then seeing at the end of last year at Hawthorn, he really thrives in that midfield, and I think they can replace him up forward as well, with the likes of Bruce and Popolo even playing up there and things like that. I think they can expend him up forward and put him into the midfield a bit more.
Nice. And lastly, James Cousins.
Yeah, he only had 43 points, but had 0.9. So, 90 points if he played 100 minutes. Rotating through the midfield. The thing is that midfield does roll deep. I'm not really sure if he's best 22, but I thought it was just one to monitor with that scoring and the points per minute there.
Yeah, nice. Well, he's the one that's vying for one of my final list spots in our home keeper league.
Okay.
Not likely he's going to take that spot unless he absolutely plays a belter in the last game. But he's one that I was quite keen on heading into last year. And, I think there's still a lot of... I've got a bit of faith in him for this season. It's just I don't think he's keeper worthy if he's on your radar.
Fair enough. Let's move on to a game that you actually did watch, Kaes.
I did. I sat down and watched this whole thing on Friday night.
Well done.
I had to work on Thursday night, man.
Okay.
Someone's got to, bring the money in for my 2 lovely cats I've got to feed at home and that kind of thing.
Don't you work at a golf course, mate? You can't play golf at night.
We have Thursday night twilight golf. It's a massive success up at Mount Osmond. So
get up there, have a round.
Exactly, it's beautiful. Yeah. Great food, great views. Mount Osmond Golf Club. Anyway, Western Bulldogs versus North Melbourne. So we talked about the Bulldogs last week, so there might be a few guys I double up on, but I want to double down on Hayden Crozier. So he scored 90 at 0.9 points per minute. He really did look amazing back there. So I think you still might be able to get him cheap if people are looking at his last year's stats, because I think he's on a massive upward trend. So no Taylor Dre back in the Bulldogs backline this year, I think is a big plus for him. And looking at how they did line up, I do like the way that, him and Jason Johannesson were kind of like the 2 ball movers back there. Alex Keith looked really solid. Bailey Williams was back there, but he was kind of playing a bit more of a defensive role. So really, I kind of see Wooden Williams swapping for each other, so Easton Wood will come back in there. Potentially the only one who could upset that is Matt Suckling. So, and there has been talk of Suckling playing on a wing this season. So I'm pretty keen on Crozier to kind of, I reckon he's going to be an 80, 85 plus kind of defender this year. I reckon he's got all the tricks, and he could be a very, very handy fantasy player for the Dogs this season.
Yeah, look, I think he might be. Well, this might be a good comparison because he is, 26 years of age?
Yeah.
He could be this year's Brad Shepherd, just a guy who's been floating around for quite a while and hasn't really set the world on fire in fantasy. He pops up out of nowhere playing a new role, or more of a role that's more involved in fantasy scoring.
Yep.
He could actually be this year's Brad Shepherd, I think.
I'm expecting big things, so if you can get him now.
I'm not expecting huge things, but I think around the 80 mark.
But that's great for
that's
a backman.
possible.
That's
exactly,
a great backman.
Exactly, yep.
Lewis Young, so the kid who kind of came in for Aaron Norton, who pulled out late with a knee injury, which all reports he's recovering well, which is great for my keeper side. So Lewis Young, he kicked 3 goals and looked really, really good early on. Took a good grab. His kicking wasn't too bad really for what's basically he's been a defender for most of his career. So while he was impressive, I just don't really see a spot for him in that forward line going forward. So I think Norton will come back. He might not start the season in the side, but I think Josh Bruce is going to be the guy that basically swaps in for Lewis Young. So if you did kind of get caught up in some hype on Friday night about Lewis Young, just call the Jets. That is Josh Bruce's spot. I do like him though. I actually thought when he kind of burst on the scene 2 years ago in the Bulldogs defence, played in a long sleeve of the first game, which is always stands out on TV.
Does.
He did some good things as the kind of intercepting, floating half back, but looks like the Dogs might try and use him as a swingman this season. So one to kind of monitor, but don't get your hopes up on what we saw on Friday night.
Lewis Young and Lockie Young are the bane of my existence. You want to know why? I'm getting off topic here, but in all my databases that I do for all the stats and stuff like that, I create like a unique identifier for each player.
And they're both L Young.
And it goes first name, first initial, the surname, and club. Every player in the competition is fine except for Lockie Young and Lewis Young, and they clash. And for ages last year, I was doubling their numbers because I was adding them together, and I didn't realise for the first month or something. But now I've got a new way I identify players.
So Bulldogs recruiters have a lot to answer for.
Pretty much. If anyone's actually interested in the way I do my nerdy things behind the scenes and scrape stats, I could actually do like a bit of a segment or behind the scenes on that if anyone's interested.
You could do an extra bonus nerd pod.
Yeah, tweet us on that if you want to hear about that. I could spread some more information on how that all happens and how it works, so you can replicate it yourself.
Tweet Heff because I don't know what's going on. I just come and rock up every Tuesday night.
And the stats are here.
Yes. Bailey Williams. So he had 72 points at 0.7 points per minute. So pretty good score for Bailey to see him bounce back into the side. Didn't really excite me though. So there was a lot of press in the start of the week where Bailey Williams was like, I'm modelling my game on Easton Wood. I'm going to be more defensive on a play on this side. It's fantastic. Easton Wood isn't a fantasy scorer. I just think that's going to be a direct swap as soon as Easton Wood comes back. He just had the first game off as a veteran. Will come back into the last Marsh Series game and resume his role. So I think Bailey kind of gets kicked out of that role. Look, he does have fantasy game. We did see that a couple of years ago. Has kind of gone into the wilderness under Bevo, but did re-sign. So just one, I know that he played and he scored an okay score for a backman, and I think that might kind of get people a bit intrigued, but just one that I would just kind of call my Jets on as well. Yeah,
I'm the same. Just the Bevo factor there. I'm not sure he lines up. He's one of Dos from Draft Doctors, the beautiful Baileys, he calls them, at the Western Bulldogs. One of those players. So there's a bit of a soft spot there for him, but I just don't trust his role. I don't trust him to be in the side even.
No, definitely not. And just one to avoid, Toby McLean.
Talked him up last week.
You did.
Yeah, when
I know you did. But I'm telling you, talk him down because he had 40 points at 0.5 points per minute. Just for me, he was a small forward role. So, and the worst thing is he was playing that small forward role. The Dogs basically had their full complement of midfielders. And if they were going to experiment, they might have experimented, in the first preseason game. They didn't. He was basically playing that small forward role. Dogs midfield is settled. I just don't believe that he can be a viable option this year in any league.
Yeah, look, I'm willing to give him another crack because I just cannot look past that scoring 2 years ago. I still have the slightest amount of faith that he can return to that. But monitor again. I wouldn't say completely write him off, but it didn't look promising on the weekend. Yeah.
Righto, on to the Roos. So I'll start with Taron Thomas. So he had 64 points at 0.7 points per minute. And I thought he did some really nice things. He was a real eye catcher. He's got plenty of speed, got some tricks. I'm just not sure if his fantasy game's there just yet. I think he might be a bit of a quality over quantity player, but there's just something about him, and I think he's obviously going to play each week because the Roos need that class and that skill. If he can spend a bit more time in the midfield, I think he's going to be eventually a half-decent scorer. But for this season, I think he still might spend the majority of the time up forward. But just kind of one to monitor. And if you are in the position to stash him this year, I think it's going to be a smart move. If you get him towards the end of a draft, he's going to have forward status. Could come to sprout, I suppose, towards the end of this season after, basically a couple of years in the system now.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. He just looks class. The eye test, you look at him, he looks like a gun, and he looks a lot more mature than a second-year player. There's a lot of composure too. Yep. I completely agree as well. I think this year's not going to be his year, but he's going to be one for the future. I get the feeling that last year's draft, there's going to be a lot of guns. It's going to be like, I think the 02 draft it was, where there was all those superstars that came out of that one. Yep. I think last year's draft is going to be quite similar.
I think you're right, and I think I'm always big preacher about the third year breakout, and I think this draft coming into next year is going to absolutely go bananas. So if you can stash some of these good second year players, this is the year to do it. Jai Simpkin, he scored 76 at 0.8 points per minute. I thought he looked really good too. Genuinely looks to have come on a bit since last year. Did have some really good games in 2019, but a few lean ones as well. My big criticism of him is that he's a handballer, but on Friday night he actually managed to get one more kick than handball. So he's learning how to play fantasy football, which is really good. And I think out of all the up-and-coming Roos midfielders, I think Simpkin's the one you want. Coming into this season, he's going to have DPP of centre forward, so definitely makes him a bit more rosterable with that forward status, especially when that pool's diluted. So Jai Simpkin looks to have the goods. I just hope he can continue that evolution of getting on the boot more than anything.
Yeah, I'd roll the dice with him this year if you've got him. Worth keeping just for the potential that he's got, I think. He's got forward status too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, so that's worth keeping as well.
Definitely. And last one for the Roos, Aidan Bonar. So he had 71 points at 0.9 points per minute. Now, I'm just not going to be caught up in the hype of Bonar just yet. So North did have lots of mids missing on the weekend. So they had there was no Higgins, no Zeeble, no Polek. So I just don't know how that midfield's going to operate. So guys like Paul Ahern, Aidan Bonar, they got a few more centre bounces than they probably would have.
Ahern,
whatever. Ahern. Bonar.
Every time.
It's just, It's
apparently it's Bonner. That's what the commentators were saying the other night. So it has to be Bonner now. Even though it's spelt nowhere near like Bonner. But anyway.
It's nothing like Riley.
I've interrupted you.
But basically, just cool your jets. His points per minute were really good, but he had the opportunity that he's probably not going to get straight away in that Roos midfield. So it might be something that does come, and we were kind of critical of him in the North Melbourne pod that he'd never really put the points together even at NEFL or VFL level. So a watch and look for Bonar. I can't even say it anymore. But
Bonar.
But if it's going to be interesting. So the worst thing is, I think, for drafts is that most drafts are going to happen in the next couple of weeks while people have a few weekends to get together and do it. The 9th of March is the Kangaroos' next Marsh Series game. Now, by that stage, there might be a few leagues who have already drafted. So you're going to kind of go in flying blind with guys like Bonar and Ahern. So just kind of see if you can monitor what's going on in the North Melbourne social media, see who's playing some good internal trials, who's lining up where. Because I think that when they get the guys back like Higgins, Zeeble, Cunnington, all kind of meshing in that midfield, it might push these kind of guys out, and he's the one of them that I'm a bit worried about.
Yeah, no, look, real positive signs for a guy who I reckon's got a career average of about 40. So he scored 30 above that, 31 above that. So,
but what would you do?
No, if I had him on my list, drop him. Definitely. Yep. But I would look at him in a draft for sure. Like, especially with early on as well, you're going to have quite a few Kangaroos midfielders out. They're going to be a very depleted midfield. And they're going to be kind of forced to play players like him. So I think he's probably worth just having a look at, just in case he's going to get a bit of opportunity. And if he takes it, he might go somewhere with it.
Yeah, interesting.
All right.
Rightio.
Oh, wait, Kaz, we're missing a player here. We've got to talk about one more. It's not on the show. It's not on the show, Doc, mate. I'm sorry.
What's up?
No. We've got to talk about Paul Ahern.
This is my game, man. You can't hijack my game.
We have to talk about Paul Ahern.
Okay,
I can't go past without talking about my boy. So anyway, he had 62 from 57 time on ground, but he went at 0.9 per minute. 0.9 points per minute. He also attended 12 centre bounce attendances as well. And we just talked about all these midfielders that are likely to miss round one. Fair chance he could start in the midfield and finally get the opportunity, because he's always shown potential as a fantasy scorer. He just never gets that opportunity. So he could actually get a bit of a chance to start in the midfield midfield. I will say, though, he did lack a bit of composure, and he looked like he was really shown up by the likes of the Bont, the Dunkley, and the McRae.
Oh, yeah, the 3 best midfielders in the competition.
So there's not many players that aren't going to look shown up with them. But look, if he's named as a defender in Ultimate Footy this year, so if he gets a run, there could be a case for him.
Yeah. But he might get that run, and then I think he's just going to get knocked straight out. He's going to have to absolutely dominate.
The thing with him, though, I think like 57% time on ground, I think he just and just looking at him, he didn't look like he had the tank to play in the midfield.
That's the issue.
But the thing is, let me continue. So, look, he kind of gets forced in there because of the midfielders out. But if those midfielders come in, it'd be great to see him across the halfback flank because I don't think he needs as much of the tank to play that role, that rebounding role a bit more. So, if he can get back to that defender kind of position, I'd be a lot more keen on him. One of the few that I'd be a lot more keen on him there than I would be in the midfield.
Oh, yeah, potentially with Marley Williams out too. He kind of opens up that spot, even if they do have that midfield. So, one to monitor. I'm happy to monitor Bono and Ahern.
Yeah.
But am I super confident that they're going to deliver this year? No.
Yeah, no.
That's my gut feel.
I'm kind of the same. But look, I'm interested.
Rightio. Next game up was Melbourne versus Adelaide, Heff.
All right, had a look at this one. A bloke I've talked about a bit in the preseason. Actually, I don't think I've talked about him in the pod, but I've written about him quite a bit. And that's Tom McDonald. So he scored 108, and he looked to be back in form. It's only preseason, but look, his late season numbers, and if you haven't checked that out, our late season averages and differentials article on keeperleaguepod.com.au. He had 106 from his last 3 and 80 from his last 5. So that was his averages at the end of the season. So he looked like he was coming good before he got injured. And we know the year before, in 2018, he averaged in the 90s as well. Yep. So if he can kind of get back to being fit, Melbourne being good and moving the ball like they should have last year, and like they did in 2018, I reckon he could be a bit of an underpriced or an undervalued player in drafts. He's going to slip a bit, I think. Looking at his average, I think it was around the 60s somewhere. Mm-hmm. So if you can get your hands on him this draft season, I reckon he's going to be a handy pickup.
Agreed. Him and
key forward, I'm talking about here, Kaes, as well.
Him and Tom Lynch, I think, are the two guys that are going to be undervalued in drafts this year. They just had too many injury issues last year and slow starts to their pre-seasons, which kind of put them on the back foot. But I think natural improvement with Melbourne and fitness improvement with McDonald, I think he's going to rise back up the ranks.
Next player I'm going to talk about is Sam Wiedemann. So he had 74 points, but what was interesting is he rucked for a lot of the game. So they did have Luke Jackson on the side, but he didn't ruck as much as Wiedemann did. So he had 20 hit-outs for the game, so that bumped his score up a little bit. I think we just need to monitor what's going to go on here because is Luke Jackson going to play alongside Gawn, or are they going to use someone like Wiedemann up forward and then he's going to pinch hit in the ruck? And he could do something like Westhoff did a couple of years ago when he gets those extra 20 points a game and could be actually viable. So if he does play second fiddle to Gawn, he could actually be an option this season.
Well, I missed this game. So who looked better? How did Luke Jackson look, really?
Look, he did some flashy things, but he looked like he kind of wasn't as up to the size of, playing against Riley O'Brien. So he looked like he was a little bit kind of underdone coming into this season. Just underdeveloped coming into this season. So, it could be very viable that Wiedemann does actually play second ruck. And
I suppose the good thing there is that it was Wiedemann and McDonald playing the same game. So if you say they were going to be like Tom McDonald, you're going to be the second ruckman. He would have done a lot more of that on the weekend. So you do kind of get a bit of a thought on what Goody might do this year. So I think those guys can just be super handy, just as your F4s, F5s. If they're going to pick up 10 or 15 points as a ruckman each week, it just really helps build those scores.
Well, there was lots of talk as well with Bruce and Gawn playing alongside each other, but now it looks like it's not going to happen with
Bruce is injured.
Exactly. So and Gawn's injured too. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens with the ruck situation. Most likely what's going to happen is Gawn's just going to ruck 90% of the game and they'll probably have a pinch hitter, probably Wiedemann, that come in and take 5 hit-outs a game and do bugger all.
Yeah. But at least he'll be playing, and at least there's always a few more points to be had if he can get in that ruck.
For sure. Aaron Vandenberg, he was fine. He's finally fit, and they played him in the Marsh game, and he looked all right. He scored 78 and went at 0.9 points per minute. So it was good to see him out there. He looked like he was playing on the wing at the time, but it could have just been a really high half-forward role. Depends where he was getting his touches. It's hard to tell on the TV. He had 19 touches, and he's just a bit of a forgotten man. I personally just can't... Well, you didn't have him in your best 22. No. I put on Twitter today, is he best 22? And a lot of Demons fans said, if he's fit, absolutely. Yeah. What are you talking about, Heff?
Yeah.
I don't know. Because he's been so injured, I just don't know how reliable he is and how well he's going to run out games and how much of a long-term prospect over the season he's going to be this season. But, he scores pretty well when he does play, so it's going to be interesting.
Without watching the game, I can't really comment. But, like he's always had a few good scores to his name. It's just been the injuries that have kind of brought him down. So if potentially Melbourne are looking for someone like that who can just do something a bit different and regenerate their playing group from last year.
Melbourne fans love him. So, well, as I learnt today. Nathan Jones, Kaes. I know you love Nathan Jones. So he had 71 points playing up forward. So he's listed as a defender this season, but he's actually playing up forward. He went at 1.2 points per minute.
That's hot.
I think in the third quarter, he just smack bang like 3 goals in a row. Like it was amazing.
Wow.
Still a no though for me.
Yeah, it's just the age factor. And look, if he's playing half forward, it means he's just going to plug some holes this year and just be there for some on-field leadership.
Half forward for me is like the most. I hate it for fantasy. Like half forward and forward pocket, like
especially
those
as like
of
a 30, 31-year-old dude. Like, no, that's a hard pass.
They always seem to be in between the play. Like they just kind of, where they're lucky to crumb something and put it through the goal.
Oh, he's a jet, and he was really good for the chops for a few years for me. But
I was a previous owner too.
It's just the fact that he's aging. Melbourne need to start playing a bit more youth in the important positions. Yes, he'll probably still play, kind of like what Jordan Lewis was doing last year. Just his fantasy relevance just drops.
Yeah, for sure. We'll move on to some of the Crows players here. So we'll look at Wayne Miller. So he looked really, really good in last week's game. So he had 29 disposals and 89 points. Went at a point a minute, which is pretty nice. Playing very outside. Looked to be half-back, sort of a wing role as well. Still not 100% sure that he's not going to get thrown around to play out forward. That's what always worries me with him. When they do that, it's really annoying, but luckily there's a new coach this season, Matthew Nix. Hopefully he's just going to play him off the halfback, and he should show, he's showing good signs at the moment. I was just worried with that halfback line though. You've got Laird, and then you've got someone like Smith who's probably going to play on a wing this season, but you've got blokes like Smith that can eat into all the defenders scoring as well. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Without seeing the game, I just think he's an absolute gun. Like, I've got so much time for him. I'd love to have him on my side. So I just back in the fact that if he's scoring those kind of points in a preseason game, he's just taken that next step and he's going to evolve into an absolute jet. Yeah,
I've been added a few times over Miller because I think I said I would rather keep someone else for this next season coming up. I can't remember who it was. But that's the only reason I say that is because I'm not confident that he's not going to have to go up forward like he did last year and just kill his scoring. Yep. That's the only thing that worries me. But yeah, like I said, hopefully with a new coach that just gets thrown out and he does play across half-back, because then he will be a gun.
He's a gun.
Rory Atkins. So he's named as a defender this season, but he was running... defender in Ultimate Footy anyway. He was running off a wing, so if he plays that role every week, it should be pretty good as a defender. So he had 93 points, but the thing was there was no Smith or no Seedsman, and they're likely going to line up on each wing. So I can see Rory Atkins actually going back to a halfback role. Again, like we talked about with Miller, there's a lot of competition back there for points, I guess, in Crows' defence. Yep. So no guarantees that he's going to score like that in season, but it was a good positive sign. If one of those good guys goes down, he could push up to a wing and be a handy defender scorer there.
As a defender, I think he's a must-have.
Okay.
Like, not as in terms of, top 10 top defender,
F1,
but I think if you've got him,
he's going to go in a draft
now.
somewhere quite early, I think, as well.
And I'd be happy if I had him. I'd be keeping him because I think that he's always shown a bit of class. Like, he's always, the Crows seem to love him. He's got pace, which they need.
Yep.
What did he average last year? He averaged 81. So if you're going that's almost like a D2 for some teams, that's some really good scores. 25 years old. I think just getting the back status is an absolute gift. He's basically averaged 80 for his last 3 seasons. So, you got to keep him.
Yeah, I think so too. Miles Paholke. So he looked pretty comfortable out there. One of those guys that I always picture him in my head because I always look at the sample numbers, and I've watched him a few times. I always picture him in my head as like a bit of a weedy kind of little kid. But you looked at him and he just looked like like he was built to play AFL.
Like a man.
He looked like a man for a change. He looked pretty comfortable out there. He had the most CBAs for the Crows as well behind O'Brien. So O'Brien obviously taking the rucks, but he was the number one midfielder playing in there. And he had 83 and went at 0.9 points per minute. So he's definitely on my watch list. He'd be available in our draft. Yep. And he looks likely, the way he played on the weekend, he looks like a starter for the Crows round 1.
You reckon?
Look, I cannot say confidently, but he looked like it in this game. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, without seeing, I can't really comment. And I haven't really seen him in the Crows. So hopefully new coach, they're going to play some youth. Hopefully he gets a go.
They might have found one here.
Nice.
And one of our favourites, Kaes, Patrick Wilson.
He is a keeper league favourite.
Absolutely. One of the Magoo's stars. Absolutely racks him up in the twos. So he had 68 from 64 time on ground. And he looked pretty fantasy friendly when he was on. He racked them up early. There's always concerns over time on ground because I'm not sure if his tank's big enough for AFL level. But Patrick Wilson... it was good to see him playing on the weekend. Fingers crossed as a keeper league favourite. We should try to get him on the pod actually or something at some stage. I reckon he'd probably do it too.
There's a few loved ones.
Anyway, look, I'm hoping we see him this year and he's actually given a chance to show us the fantasy scoring he's capable of.
Yeah, if he can do that, if he can emulate any of that SNFL form, he's got to go into your side, I reckon.
Yep.
Where's the Ben Kaes watch?
Look, he's actually right. A bit of a run through the midfield, but only played the second half, so his scoring didn't look as great. But I think if you looked at the points per minute wise, it would have been fine.
I was listening to 5AA on the way home yesterday. And Graham Corns was a big rap on Ben Kaes.
God.
So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But anyway, it's Ben Kaes' season, man.
All right, we'll have to wait and see. But no, look, he played the second half and he looked all right from a fantasy perspective. So
you're beauty. Yeah. Right, Gold Coast Geelong, the game I watched on Saturday night. So chips in. I'm chips in. Matty Grau, number 1 draft pick in any keeper league. I think he's got to go in there. He looked absolutely sublime. Was everywhere. 9 kicks, 11 handballs. Didn't take a mark, which is quite surprising. So all he has to do is add a couple of them and he's basically tonning up. And 7 tackles. So he tackled really well. Almost, I know it's the ginger thing, but he looks like a little Clayton Oliver, like just in and around the ball, wraps up blokes. Jeez, it was exciting.
Can you say ginger, mate? Is that PC?
Red hair. I don't know what else. He looks like Clayton Oliver, man.
Okay, I was just pissing.
He has to go early. So I've got number 1 draft pick in our home league. I was umming and ahhing because I'm not really a big one.
I love this.
I'm not really a big one on taking first years, but I am chips in.
You've really changed your tune. I've been saying it all pre-season. Yeah. He's definite number 1 in a lot of drafts.
My thing was I didn't think he was as good as Sam Walsh, but now I've changed my tune.
He is. He was not far off those numbers, and like what I said, I think with Sam Walsh it's the case he kind of could have made. He was surrounded by a lot more talented pool as well, which kind of means that you could have a bit more support out there. I think he had to do a lot more heavy lifting in the underage stuff. So I think with Rao, I reckon he's good to go. He's going to be a star,
big time. Speaking of guys who've really pumped up on this pod, is Connor Buderick. I can't remember. The commentators were saying it weird. Buderick. Yeah. He had 65 points at 0.6 per minute, which is not too bad for a guy who's really flew under the radar. So we flagged him well into the back end of last year when all the draft stats came out.
We did our top 20 fantasy draftees podcast. He was quite high in there. I think almost top 5.
So he's kind of slid under the radar for those who are new because Gold Coast basically got some priority picks, but they could lock him into the second round of the draft.
Because he was a Queensland native, they could basically, with the new rules, they can take them with the basically last picks of the draft, and that's what they did.
So he probably would have been, I don't know, top 10, top 20 player potentially.
Top 30 probably, yeah.
So he probably would have got a bit more airtime because of that, but because the Gold Coast had basically locked him in from the start, he kind of slid under the radar. But what I loved about him on Saturday night was he was just so composed. Like he had plenty of composure around the ball. Yes, he was still a bit, looked a bit young, a bit scrawny, but didn't really look out of place. So because he had played a fair bit of NAFL footy as a 17-year-old kid for the Suns last year. So
such a tough competition as well.
Yeah, but he's still playing against men. I love guys who play footy against men.
Just making a joke, Kaes.
Don't stir me up, man. Right. But for a kid, I think he's on the right way. I think as a salary cap player, if you are in that landscape, he's got to be a must-have in your side because I think they'll play him early. He might not play round 1, but I think he'll definitely play some games this year.
My thing with him, I'm just not sure if he's midfield ready because he is quite short. I know he can play out forward as well. So I know in this game he did run through there a bit, but I think Gold Coast might have just been testing a few things because we saw in the second half he really quieted down because he was spending more time up forward. Yeah. I'm just wondering about that. I just can't, with the Gold Coast midfield, you can't say in 3 or 4 years a player like this will definitely be in the midfield because all their midfielders are around the same age. I'm just a bit worried about that. But if he can get a run in there, he's going to be a good scorer because he always has been as a junior.
Yeah. Huey Greenwood, probably almost too good for the pod, but definitely worth a mention. He had 114 points at 1.1 points per minute. So I think he's a must-have. So forward status this year, I think if you've managed to hold on to him from the Crows time, you're super happy right now. You'd be licking your lips.
He'll be in someone's team from last year for sure.
He was in everything on Saturday night. Like he had that nice big mop haircut he's kind of grown up there.
Yeah, it's a bit longer.
Real surface style. He really stood out. But I was a bit unsure about him before this pre-season and kind of where the whole Gold Coast team would line up. And I know they weren't full strength because guys like Ellis and that weren't in there, but he looked like an absolute must-have if you are in any kind of fantasy football.
I'm not sure if this has been mentioned before ever, but he is an ex-basketballer case. I'm not sure if anyone knows that. The commentators definitely don't bang on about every time he gets a touch. But I think it was Brandon Ellis on Instagram put up a pretty sweet video of him just like hitting clutch jump shots in a social basketball game that they were playing. I just thought that was pretty sweet.
He was like a college baller.
Yeah, it was quite good, but it's just awesome to see a player like that just like actually in his element doing that. Yeah, it was good. Moving on.
Lastly, for the Gold Coast Suns, Ben Ainsworth, he scored 109 at 1 point per minute. So I was super happy with this game. So I kind of flagged in our Gold Coast preview that, I needed to see something from Ainsworth. This was his year. He's kind of had his issues with injury and form. He's always had the potential, just needed to see it. And he played an absolutely amazing game. Was so clean, was in the guts, tackled, did everything. He was basically the full package. Kind of had my Saturday night penciled in basically on Jack Bowe's watch, who was a touch disappointing, but didn't get as much run through the midfield.
That's surprising.
But he did play through the back line, so there might be a little DPP coming for Jackie Bowes.
Average 70 there would be great.
That's fine. It's a keeper. Anyway, but Ben Ainsworth was an absolute standout. He blew me away. He might be in a few pools this year because, it was just a bit of a flyer for some leagues. Yeah. Potentially there will be some leagues who don't keep as many players. And I think that he is one that you'd love to have if you can get your hands on him.
Yeah, agree. He's hopefully, on the back of that, some people might be. I know there's been a lot of talk on Twitter, a lot of people adding us and basically saying, what do I do now? I've got Ben Ainsworth on my side. Do I need to find a spot for him? And I'm kind of saying you should think about it, at least, depending on who you got. Yep. But yeah, he could actually be dropped back, especially those leagues that play waivers as well, might drop off a player who was injured for the majority of the season like Ainsworth was last year. He could be floating around in there too. So yeah, that's going to be exciting for a few leagues. I reckon he's definitely one to watch this season. It's about go time for him.
Oh yeah. Looking at the Cats, they were a bit of a basket case really. They didn't really seem too interested. And when you're playing in a cotton on T-shirt, you can't really be taken too seriously, can you?
I was watching that one with the missus and she's like, why are they wearing T-shirts? I just don't ask.
It's not, I think it's almost a mental thing. It's like, what are they doing? Like, put a bloody Guernsey on your peanuts. Yeah, it was very weird. And especially in the Gold Coast where it's hot and sweaty, they would have been sweating bullets.
Yeah.
Anyway, one guy that really kind of stood out to me was Jacob Kennelly. So he had 56 points at 0.9 points per minute. Played his part nicely and showed some dash through that Geelong backline and midfield. He only averaged 60 points and 9 touches in the VFL last year, which was a bit weird because I thought he kind of had a bit of fantasy game on Saturday night. His underage numbers were okay, so he's coming into his second year this year. Was originally from SA, I think, one of the gun kids from our state league winning team. But there was just something about him. He's got some good speed, and I think that might be an asset for the Cats this year. I don't know if I doubt he'll be playing around one, but I think one you might want to monitor. He had a few tricks.
Not one on my radar. Don't really know a lot about him, to be honest, but we got to talk about someone from Geelong, so I'm sure he can make the list.
There's a couple others. Yeah. Tommy Atkins, he was really good, 82 points at 0.8 points per minute.
Looked class.
Yeah, he looked really impressive. So he was very handball happy on the night, but looking back through some of his stats through the last few prospectuses, that's kind of been his thing, that pressure forward. I think he actually racked up 26 tackles in a game or something like that in a VFL game, looking back on some old news. So just going to be interesting to see if he gets the opportunity that he did on Saturday night. So he looked really good through the middle, but will he get that opportunity comes the season time? I'm not sure. Like, he basically played all last year as that pressure forward. I'd love to see him kind of get in that midfield because I think he's actually got a bit of class. I think he's a forward this year. So if you can get him, I think he might be a nice little late pick-up. Hopefully the Marsh Series game hasn't spiked too many people's interest, but definitely one that I'm keen on.
And speaking of class, let's talk about Jordan Clark.
He was outstanding.
Yeah.
76 points at 0.7 points per minute. He was just so impressive. And
his field kicking, amazing. And a defence too.
Yeah. And he just looked like he belonged, and was part of it. Like, I'm not saying he was bad last year, but potentially I've forgotten how good he was over the pre-season, but he just kind of blew me away. He was just almost like levels above in terms of class, composure. His foot skills are immaculate. Absolutely zero doubts now. So, I was a bit worried about him losing back status now and having mid only. Nah, you're keeping him. He was fantastic.
What was interesting is he was playing defence, and there was a lot of midfielders missing as well. So he could, we'd say don't draft people or don't keep people on the back of them potentially getting status, but he's a chance.
It would be an absolute blessing if he got back status, but I'd be keeping him as a mid-only.
I'm happy to do that too. Yeah, he's going to be a gunner eventually.
All right, Heff, I'm going to leave the room for 10 minutes while you talk about Port.
I'll start off by talking about a Brisbane player first, because there wasn't really a lot to talk about.
Come home with the cream, is that right?
And actually, I don't have a big rap to talk about this guy. I'm just going to talk about Cam Ellis-Yeoman, because he was talked about quite a bit in the off-season, what effect he was going to have on a few of the younger brigade in the Brisbane midfield, so people like McCluggage and Berry and things like that. But yeah, look, he looked off the pace, like really off the pace. He had 38 from 78% time on ground. No thank you for me. He didn't look good. So I'm not sure if it was pre-season hype. Looking back to the previous seasons, 2018 he went at 70 plus, and then 80 plus in 2017. I don't think he's going to be anywhere. I don't know. I think he's going to be with somewhere, and if he could, maybe play somewhere else in the field, he might be a good pinch hitting role. But for me, I don't think he's currently in their best 22, and I don't think he's going to have to worry about Berry and stuff being affected by him too much at this stage.
Yeah, I was never really buying into that hype in the pre-season, because Brisbane had such a good list anyway, and he was never really like a mainstay of the Crows side. I know he had some injury problems and that kind of thing, but interesting. I'm not that keen on him now after the stats from there. But there's one more game to redeem himself potentially, so just monitor him before you write him off completely, I think.
All right, we'll talk about a few Port Adelaide players now. So now you can leave the room, Kaes.
20 players on this list.
There's 4 here, mate. Come on, you're seeing things.
Felt like 20.
Yeah, whatever. Look, Stephen Motlop, he turned up, rotated wing and forward, kind of with Sam Powell-Pepper in that role. Look, he looked great, but I've never really liked his consistency, so he is not really one for me. But I thought I'd mention him just because you see the 100 at the top of the thing, and he's going to be in a lot of keeper league pools, so worth mentioning, but I don't think he's really worth looking at.
Well, Charlie Dixon was super raps on him, talking up he's the fittest he's ever been, he's ready to go. Yeah. If you had him on your side, would you even float the idea of keeping him?
No, I would not. Not at this stage. You know what I feel about key forwards. But looking at a couple years ago, he was, quite up and about. I actually think I've mixed 2 segments up here. I've talked about Cam Ellis-Yeoman and Charlie Dixon in one there. I've looked at the 2 notes. But he was the other one we're actually going to talk about. He did look good. So, yeah. He went, I think he went at 80 plus a couple seasons ago and went down last year. Yep. So I reckon, if he can get back to that stage, he's definitely going to be one of those handy pickups in draft, but he's not one that I really would be confident on keeping. What do you think?
I wouldn't be keeping Dixon, but after kind of some of the highlights I saw on the weekend and the numbers and the way he was just clunking the ball in.
On your Harris Andrews,
on my boy Harris Andrews, who's a fantastic defender. It looked exciting. And there's been a bit of talk in Adelaide that, he's actually fit again and that kind of thing. And he did look quite imposing in all the highlights. So he'd be one that I'd be focusing on mid-draft, I reckon, if you, especially if you're in that window and you need someone who can potentially knock out a 70, 80 each week.
Last year in our draft, he went first round to the eventual Premier. So he wanted to pick up a forward who was going to play every week, because I think his keepers were pretty hot. Yeah. But yeah, look, that's the kind of potential I guess he could go, because if you go to his prior season number 2017 in particular, where he was tackling a lot and kicking goals, he can get around to that 80 mark. So if he can hit that again, look out.
Could be his year.
Look, Dan Houston. Everyone's waiting for us to talk about him. But look, he started slow, but then really got the skates on. So he had 95 from 71% time on ground. As a defender, look, the 95 doesn't look great as a midfielder, but because he's named as a defender, that's amazing scoring, really, especially when you consider the time on ground. I'm just wondering, Kaes, do we chuck the hashtag 2G4P next to his name yet?
Yes, please. I think he's too good, and I'm just sick of talking about him. I'm just sick of the Dan Houston hype. Everyone, it's not even a secret anymore. He's going to be a gun, no matter what kind of fantasy style of footy you're playing, whether you're doing salary cap, whether you're doing draft. People want Dan Houston, especially in salary cap. You should have him. But I think he's going to be way too good for this pod.
Speaking of hashtag 2G4P, Connor Rosie, I reckon, might get there towards the end of the season. He had 94 from 57% time on ground, so he copped a bit of a head knock with Alex Witherden, I think it was. Spent a bit of time, I think he spent 20 minutes getting checked, but he came back on. So look, seriously, get on board this guy. He's got midfield time in the bag this season, but I still reckon he'll keep forward status because he's pretty valuable up there. Plus, he's so freakish around goals as well. Can snap him from everywhere. Absolute gun. Just get on board, because I reckon he is going to be one of the next best forward kind of stars in the competition, I think.
Agreed.
All right, move on to last player I'm going to talk about, and that's Justin Westhoff. So it was interesting here. So he had scored 77 from 63% time on ground, and he played backup ruck, but Lysett didn't play. So what I'm thinking is, could Ken be considering playing one ruck and having Westhoff the backup like he was back in the day, or is this just like a Marsh Series, just a weird thing because they had a ruckman out? It'd be good for fantasy if he could play that ruck role. So monitor the next game and see what happens. I think what's going to happen is they're going to play Lysett and Laddams in tandem, which is probably going to affect one of their scoring. I'm not sure who it will be. The only game they've actually played together, Lysett had 144 and Laddams had about 30. So we'll have to wait and see how that actually works out. It's not really much of a sample size there, but it's going to be interesting. But if Westhoff does kind of play that role as a backup ruck or a pinch hitting ruck, could get a few hit out numbers and boost his scoring there like he did a couple of seasons ago.
He's going to be Mr. Fix-It once again for Port Adelaide.
Yeah,
just play wherever they need him to. Look, as a centre forward, what did he average last year? 77, which is probably unders.
Yeah.
I think he can improve that.
I think he gets to the 80 mark again, which is where he goes at. So yeah, if he gets to there, he's worth having in his final. Will probably be his final season.
Yep.
All right, that wraps up the Marsh Series review. We'll jump into just looking at the membership stuff. So, look, we've got the points per minute adjusted scores that are coming up. That's not actually for members, that's public out there. But that's been a real draw card for the website the last week. So what we do is we basically work out how many points a player scores per minute on ground. We add the times by 120 just so we can get a level playing field if they were to play 100% time on ground, which is never going to happen. Everyone says we should multiply it by 100. That's more realistic, which I 100% agree with. But a lot of players play more than 100 and it brings their scoring down. So it doesn't really make sense to bring a player scoring down if it's going to be higher. So that's why we do 120. So just to clear that up for people asking about that. But look, on the membership side of things, we do have State League fantasy scores, Drafty fantasy scores, Breakout Tracker. State League fantasy scores and the Breakout Tracker is going to update weekly during the season. So you'll get all your players playing in the twos, how they're scoring, or if you play waivers, you'll be able to see who the gun fantasy scorers are on the twos and maybe snap them up before they look like debuting and things like that. So that's going to be handy. We've also got the rankings for every lineup there now, top 100 rankings for every position except rucks, where we only did 50 because there's not 100 to rank.
No, and 50 is too many.
And we found that out the hard way. And we did a mini episode for every line as well. So talking about the top 50 in our rankings there too. The draw card at the moment though is the Gold Members Facebook group. Everyone is getting on board that thing. I think we've got about 59 in there now, Gold Members. And there's Gold Members that signed up that still haven't joined. But there's also Gold Members that are trying to get in and they have no idea what the code is to get in. Just a public service announcement. The code is in your sign-up email. You'll get 2 sign-up emails and it's in 2 of them. So just go back and have a look at those because people are like writing, I never got one, or I don't know what the code is, I think, or just let me in as the code. And then I have to actually go through and check who's an actual Gold member. And it can take me a while to actually get to that and approve it. So just be easier if a few people just had a look in the emails. But that's the one I'm going to say.
And now's the time to join, because now is the time you need to get that last minute bit of information about who you should keep,
Absolutely.
who you should delist, or who you should put, number 1, 2, or 3 in your rankings, especially for
with drafts coming up. You need all the resources available. So I highly recommend getting on board. But as per usual, we talk about, or we go through and we name 5 Gold members who have signed up each week. And this week we have
Tom Putzi, Tom Erdenuff, Zach Lang, Matthew Schweitzer, and Adam Warney-Child. That's of DT Talk fame and the Traders. So
that's how good we are.
Some elite company. So you could actually pick the brain of the one and only Warney.
I don't think Warney's jumped in the Gold members group, but maybe we should try to get him in there. We should make a campaign for him to join.
He's probably a very, very busy man this time of year.
He's got the join code. We could get him in there, but I don't think he'll be answering too many questions for us. I think he's got a bit of his own work to do. But thanks for those Gold members for signing up.
Thanks, Tom, Zach, Matt, and Adam. Hopefully I haven't butchered too many of your last names, but
I think you did a pretty good job there.
Yeah,
that's fine. Hopefully. All right, before we move on to the listener questions, we'll go through a podcast reviews. They're starting to roll in now, actually, which is good. Nice. We were at the bottom of the barrel, and every week we've had someone save us, but don't stop them coming in, because we will run out eventually if people stop writing them.
And Heff's very vain. He likes to be told he's doing good work.
No, look, I'm very happy to have a 4. I'm very happy to 1 star. 5 stars does actually bump us up the ratings a bit more, and the comments, I think, and actually leaving a review helps even more. So that was good too. But But this one's from Self-Made Failure, and he writes, top notch. I stumbled onto these boys when listening to other more price-based fantasy podcasts, and I haven't looked back. Great focus on relevant players for keeper leagues, good structure and banter, questionable, especially about the uselessness of key position forwards.
That's a lie. They're very useful.
Absolutely. That is great. That's a great insight from a listener there.
Self-Made Failure, I thought I might have liked you, but
I'm glad we're on the right track. I love this guy.
Who's on the key forwards?
Let me finish the review, mate. Then you can complain. Hopefully, listening to you boys will give me the tools to finally win after 2 runner-up seasons in a row. I've got faith. Self-Made Failure. You've got it this year, mate. Thanks for writing in.
It's in the bag. But is there anyone out there who's with me on the key forward club?
All right, I think we need to get people tweeting in here.
Yeah, so surely someone wants to join in the Key Forward fan club.
As the president, you need some members, I think, Kaes.
I do.
Tweet in if you want to be a member of the Key Forwards fan club with Kaes.
Stand with me.
Yep, tweet
We've got some of the most exciting players in the competition now, Greg. We've got Norton, Kerno,
I can feel a hashtag coming in, stand with Key Forwards or something like that. We'll have to think of something witty.
Bring it on.
All right, let's get into the listener questions. We're under an hour so far, but only just like 55 minutes.
That's good.
Yeah.
These won't take that long, I don't reckon.
Nah. I'd like to get them back to an hour, but it's still going to be better than, 90 minutes. Questions. All right, on to the listener questions. This segment, we let our listeners write in, ask a few questions, and we try to answer them as best we can. Kaes, who's up first?
At Louis_F. Did Connor Rosie somehow exceed our own expectations from the Intra Club?
I watched the Intra Club with Louis. Met him. He's part of the Lane Kicking podcast. I met him on the night. Really good bloke. Look, he did, I think. Just to see him play against real opposition players and do a similar type of thing to what he did at the Intra Club. Brisbane didn't play their weakest side either, so it was actually quite a strong side they played. So it was good to actually see him do it against good players. His points per minute scoring was through the roof, as we mentioned earlier, 1.3. Playing him a full game, maybe just likes playing against Brisbane, actually. That was the game he had that big blinder last year. But I think he's actually going to replicate that this year. So,
jeez, he looks good.
Yeah, next one.
At Dale Travers. So he says, Hawthorn midfield is stacked, including their wings. Will Wingard get good midfield time, or is it classic pre-season rotations in the Ansett Cup or whatever it's called these days?
I think he will, just going on the back end of last season. I know Tom Mitchell comes in, but I think they could actually play more rotations through different parts of the field. There was talk earlier in the year, we didn't really see it on the weekend because Mitchell only played half the game, but of Mitchell playing a bit more forward time like he did up at Sydney earlier in his career, just to kind of ease him back in as well. Yep. So it could be something like that. If not, I'm not sure of the logistics or how it works, but I do think Wingard's best position is in the midfield, so I can see him playing midfield time. I think Clarko sees that as well.
Yeah, so Clarko, if anyone's going to do it, Clarko will roll the dice and do it.
Yep, I reckon so as well.
Next question.
All right, this one's from Jerry Rayner. So can I have some McKenna rumours, wild speculation? Does he play AFL?
As a Bombers man, Jerry, he'll be back. So don't let any rumour or innuendo sway you. Basically, I hope he comes back because the Dons might not have 22 players to pick from by the sounds of it. But look, I don't have any inside information, but I'm actually kind of happy he's left now, gone home, seen the family, did whatever he needs to do back home, and hopefully comes back and plays round one. The Dons have said he's actually been doing all the training, etc., over in Ireland. So I'm actually just looking forward to what he can do in 2020. We kind of hyped him up in a lot of our pre-season pods. So hopefully there's that growth here. But yeah, I'm confident that he can come back and do some good stuff.
What I will say, Jerry, is if he doesn't come back, it looks really good for Mason Redmond.
It looks good for Mason Redmond anyway, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so too. So without him being there.
It probably, if he doesn't come back, it probably looks good for like a Jordan Ridley, I suppose.
But that's true, actually. I'd like to see him play a bit more defence.
Yeah, Mason Redmond is, I think he's going to go up and up this year too. But hopefully McKenna comes on board too.
All right, at Analysis Footy. So how do you see Newman's scoring being affected by Doherty returning.
Interesting to see how they line up this week, the Blues, I think. So
yeah,
I can't see SPS playing half back. There's been a lot of hype about, him being back there. I think that they've got enough quality back there in Doherty, Newman and Simpson probably. So
in the intra-club, wasn't he playing up the ground a bit more? Or
yes.
Yeah.
So and Newman, I think, was playing actually in the back pocket and taking all the kickouts as well. I think that's the report I saw. So this week, hopefully they most of those guys play together and we can see a bit of how they'll line up. I think if anyone's actually going to give up a bit of time, it's going to be Simpson. So I think that Newman and Doherty can both cohabit a nice half-back line.
Well, we saw Doherty and Simpson score well together for a couple of years.
Yeah. So it's really just, I think, potentially Simpson's got one more year on him, and I think he might play a bit more of a bit part as opposed to that. But if Newman's the guy taking the kickouts, I don't think his numbers are going to be affected too greatly whatsoever.
Instead of Doherty and Simpson like it was a few years ago, all scoring awesome, it's just going to be Doc and Newman. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, this one's from @Russ2468, regular of the podcast, absolute legend, keeps us going with questions. Power Pepper or Sam Petracca Seaton, both are likely to be available at my first, 8th, or second, which is 16th pick in my league redraft. It'll come down to how much mid-time these DPPs get. SPP looked really good on the weekend with 40% of the CBAs, but his spot fell tenuous last year.
Before I have my little answer, how did SPP look for all the power?
Yeah, he looked like he played that forward role, but he played it as like a crash, like back, like tackling kind of guy. So racked up some good tackle numbers, kicked a couple goals. I think he kicked one goal, or maybe just set up a couple. I can't remember what actually happened. But yeah, then he did play the midfield time as well. I think he scored pretty well as well. I think I've left him out of talking to him in the actual Port Adelaide review from the Marsh Series. We probably should have mentioned him, but I think he looked pretty good, Kaes. What do you reckon?
Well, if it comes to, it's really a bit of a gut feel call, I think, because I have them both on par in a way. So I feel that SPS is probably more in Carlton's long-term plans than potentially SPP is at the power. I don't know. I just kind of feel that he's a bit dispensable there with the kind of midfielders they have. And I know he's one of the younger ones and they invested a good draft pick in him early on. But I feel that out of all that core midfield group, he's the one on the outer, which is why he's playing a bit up forward. So for me, Russ, I reckon the decision comes down to what's best for your team going into this year. Do you need the back status of SPS, or do you need that forward status of Power Pepper? But if you were basically saying you've got a choice of one of them, I'd probably lean towards SPS.
Sorry, just going back to Sam Power Pepper, he did score 102 on the weekend from 65% time on ground. He didn't kick that goal, but I remember now he set it up for Butters. So yeah, it was on the goal line. He gave it to him.
Who would you go with as a biased Port supporter?
Oh dear. I would probably go. I reckon it's a coin toss. Like there's not going to be too much of a difference between them. Depends if you need the defender or the forward. I think. I think both are likely to not be in. Sam Petracca-Seaton, I reckon, is probably more likely to have a back status in the future.
Agreed.
Whereas I think Sam Powell-Pepper might lose it eventually going back to an inside midfielder, especially if someone like Ollie Wines leaves at the end of the year where there's a lot of talk about.
Yeah.
So I'd probably lean just slightly towards SPS, but I don't think he'll fail with either of them.
Agreed.
Yep.
At Destroyer, he needs 2 starters out of Witherden, Burton, Ryan, Short and Redmond. Which ones are you picking, Heff?
Oh, God, this is hard. 2 starters. So to start, I'm just going to pick the best 2 that you'd probably go with. And even then, I can't really... Look, I'd probably go as bad as he was last year. I'd give Witherden another chance just because of the track record.
Yep.
I'm hoping he's going to bounce back. He was scoring pretty reasonable on the weekend until he got knocked out. I think it was in the 47 from about 50% time on ground or something like that. So he was scoring okay from there. After that, it's
Luke
hard.
Ryan for me.
Yeah, toss up between. I'd play any of those 3. It's a genuine coin toss between there as well. Either Burton or Ryan, just because I guess the history. Short could definitely jump up and become an absolute superstar this year. Redmond is got like we talked about before with Connor McKenna leaving or going back to Ireland is a real opportunity for him to be their main ball mover out of defence. Yeah, Ryan or Burton. I don't know, Kaes. I can't choose. I can't choose. One of those. I think
you've got some great options.
Yeah, you've got a good backline.
You're not worried.
Yeah.
Another one of these tough questions is from Nathan Riches. He needs to keep 2 of these 5. Jade Gresham, Darcy Parish, Wayne Miller, Christian Petracca and Jaden Short. He's leaning towards Miller and Gresham at the moment.
Oh my God, these questions are hard. So Gresham, Parish, Miller, Petracca and Short. So Gresham... Miller, Petracca, Short, they were all like people I 100% want to be keeping. Who's on the rest of your team?
Yeah, I know.
They must only keep 8 or something like that. Leaning towards Miller and Gresham. This is going to come down to what positions you need, I think. So if you're leaning towards them, you're looking at a defender, but then you've got a forward as well. Oh God, I really like Petracca this year as a forward. Look, I think Gresham's going to be split between mid forward, but I think Petracca could actually go into the midfield a lot more permanently this year. Then again, if you're looking forward, that might be bad for his forward status. I think Short should also come under consideration going into the future. I think you've got to go with your gut, I think, here, because I don't think anything I could say is actually going to be that helpful, because they're all definitely capable players. Yeah. So and again, there's not going to be much between them. So Gresham should go around between the mid-80s joint. I think Petracca should go around mid-80s. Miller should go around mid-80s. Short will probably go close to 80. Parrish will be around the 80 mark as well. So it narrows it down to 3. Go with what positions you need out of Gresham, Miller and Petracca, I think.
I would be going Miller and Parrish.
Okay, Miller and Parrish.
I just think that Essendon are very, very depleted this year in the midfield with their injuries, etc. And I think Parrish is going to get more of an opportunity in there. And I'm pretty hot on Wayne Miller. But I don't think you can actually go wrong.
I'm going to go Miller and Petracca. I really don't know. Or Gresham.
Well, at least you're keeping Miller. So that's one thing you got. You keep Miller.
I defender. That's the thing. And then I have to choose the best forward out of those two. And I can't split them at the moment. So, I don't know.
Next question. Craig Frederick. How much stock are we putting into these Marsh games? Is it realistic to be jumping on board Melbourne and Gold Coast players?
Look, take the Marsh series with a grain of salt, I think. So, Bont absolutely killed it, but the North midfield had no one in it. And then a lot of Geelong midfielders were missing as well, which made the Gold Coast kids look really, really good. But then someone like Houston and Rosie, they played close to a full complement of midfielders in Brisbane. So you got to assess each case differently, I think. So yes, some games you should be actually buying into some of the scores, and other games you've got to be jumping onto others. So with Gold Coast, probably not. Melbourne, Truck didn't have Brayshaw playing, did he?
No.
Yeah. So I think. Yeah. Look, I think you've got to be just assess on each game,
and I think that with Gold Coast, that was probably a bit more of a snapshot of what you're almost going to get. They didn't have Brandon Ellis, I suppose, but they still. Those kids are still going to play, and guys like McPherson who went nuts and Ainsworth who went nuts, they're still going to be playing. So it's just like, will they be getting as much opportunity as they can?
In terms of their scoring, is probably not going to be like it was.
Will Darcy McPherson score 130 each week? No, but if he doesn't, he is probably going to score around 80, 90 again if you kind of take into the opportunity there. So it's just a matter of kind of looking at the list, who played well and how it all worked out. So it takes a bit of time, but definitely worth thinking about.
I think Melbourne you can jump on board except for Petracca. You've really got to monitor Petracca again, because that probably won't happen each week. Gold Coast as well, you've got to just think about, basically who they're playing each week and what kind of opportunities they're going to get.
Wayne Gartner, any rookies standing out for a round 1/early season debut?
Oh, well, just in the back of that, all the Gold Coast names really, Rowell, Anderson and Butterick.
Yep, I think Rowell and Anderson will be playing round 1, Butterick 50-50.
Yep.
For me, he's not a rookie, second year player. I talked about him before. I thought Kennelly was quite impressive. So early season, I think he might be around the mark.
Didn't seem to be a lot of rookies on the show. Actually, Tristan Cherry from North Melbourne, but I just can't see him playing. He scored really well. I just can't see him playing with Goldstein on the side.
Yep.
The thing is with Campbell, not in the wings, Cherry coming in, he could be straight into number 2 spot, so that could be interesting if something goes down. Someone goes down there. James Holder. So where would you take Tim English in a start-up keeper league?
Well, we both ranked him 7th in our ruck rankings for keeper league. So it's a tough one. So I think taking rucks late is a bit trendy at the moment. Everyone's going, take your rucks late,
I've been doing it for years and in redrafts, so not keeper leagues. We only have one draft, obviously, but in redrafts, and it's been paying dividends for me for years. But
I think you need to think about it a bit more in a keeper league. So you just got to be aware of how the runs happen. So a run, if you don't know what it is basically when, all of a sudden midfielders start getting drafted, or all of a sudden forwards start getting drafted, and people can get caught up in those things. And sometimes it's good to go against the run. But I think if the ruck run starts in a keeper league draft, you've got to be aware. So obviously guys like Gawn and Grundy are going to go early on, and they're a completely separate class. And then potentially when you're getting to your Wits or your Lysets, potentially Englishes, I think you got to get on board then, because they're the best young ruckman around. You throw Darcy in the mix, potentially Nan Curvis, but then and Riley O'Brien, but then after that it's absolutely famine, and you just don't know. So I think you've got to put a bit more value on him in a keeper league draft if you're keen on someone like English. I think him around like this, the same grouping as O'Brien, those kind of things, I think that's a fair point to take him. But yeah, if you just be aware of when that run happens in that draft.
I agree to an extent that you do have to put a little bit more emphasis on rucks in keeper leagues, but at the same time, so many variables happen in drafts that it's too hard to really tell what goes on. So what I will just say is monitor what happens in the draft and where the rucks go. If rucks start going earlier than you think they should, then don't get sucked in, really. So if you look at someone like Matthew Cruiser is probably going to be available very late, like going into it. No, but listen. But then you can pick up Mark Pitney like really late too. So he will be probably the Carlton ruckman going forward from there. So, and he'll probably, be serviceable 70, 80 average over the next few years. So again, you could probably snag someone a bit late. So you've just got to monitor what happens in the draft and where rucks really go, because don't stress if they all start to go, because that just means you can load up on more midfielders, defenders and forwards and things like that. For me, like I generally try to fill up, captain option first go. If you're playing captain option, I fill up my positions, take a few mids, and that's when I start thinking about rucks. And that's probably the way I'd take it, unless you're gifted with an early pick where you grab Grundy. And Gorn. Yeah,
of course.
Yep.
Next question.
Dylan Brooks, has Stephen Hill got any fantasy value as the rare BF DPP?
I kind of have a feeling he's not the craziest of late picks. So he turns 30 this year. His best seasons were in 2015, 2016, where he was a 90 average player. Obviously very, very risky. So he only played the 3 games last year. Body was not right. From all reports, he's been pretty fit this preseason and looking quite good. As that back forward DPP, I kind of like those players. Just gives you a lot of versatility. So wouldn't shock. And I don't think you're going to have to pay anything for him. I think you can get him super, super late. People will just completely discard him, which might be fair enough if that's your take. But if you're just looking for someone who can potentially be best 22 and kind of help you, stock your team up, I think he's not the worst pickup.
Not worth the risk for mine. I think he just could be one of those players that just completely disregarded with a new coach, just wanting to blood youth and stuff like that. So there's that risk of just sitting in the twos all years and you've just drafted a player that's not going to play, where you could have taken, again, no one's going to be stupid and take him early on. They're going to take him without their last pick of the draft, but I think you're just better off going with a future gun or someone you could probably try to stash for later on, I think.
Monitor the Marsh.
Yeah.
Sam Savitas, who would you take first, Petracca, Gresham or Rosie in a league where goals are worth +8?
Oh, another Petracca versus Gresham question. I'm going to go, I've thought about it. I'm going to go Petracca purely on the back of last weekend. But then I actually thought a bit more. There's going to be a lot more competition at St Kilda for midfield spots, I think, even with Brayshaw and Oliver there.
Who's going to kick the most goals out of Petracca, Gresham and Rosie?
Anyway, I missed the end of that question, but I did go through and add this up earlier. So I recalculated all the averages with an 8-point goal tally, and it didn't really change anything. So, look, I'd probably go Petracca and then Gresham and then Rosie. But then I think Rosie's probably more likely to be a forward in the future. But I don't know. If Track plays in the midfield like he did on the weekend, he was an absolute star. Like, they've got to trial him in that position this year. They've got to try him in the guts.
You'd think so.
Yeah. So it's just going to, I think Rosie's probably the safest for keeping forward going forward. Actually, Gresham probably is as well. These comparisons are so hard.
They are so hard.
Especially when they're all like absolute guns
Good
that
players,
you all want to keep. Look, I'll go Petracca, Gresham, and then Rosie for mine. Yeah.
All right. And last question.
From Daniel Eldridge, Petracca is another Petracca question. Daniel Eldridge, Petracca, is he fake or will he become the real deal?
Fake news.
What?
Sell now.
No.
Yes, sell now.
What do you
He's
mean?
never going to be hotter property than he is now. So his personal best average was in 2018, which is at 80.7. Averaged 76 last year. He is the run-of-a-mill, boring forward. Can play the game. Don't hate him as a player. He's an impact player, an actual football gun, but he's a fantasy headache, one you don't want. Sell high while you can. It's one Marsh Series game, and he only played in the midfield because bloody no Brayshaw was there.
I do think right now people
if you were trading stocks, you would sell because he's not going to average 130 in the season. He's not even going to average 100. He's not even going to average 90.
We're not selling stocks here. We're selling fantasy footballers. But I do agree that the hype is really high at the moment.
Way too high. My hype would be in Hugh Greenwood more than Christian Petracca.
What, you'd rather have Christian Petracca? So you'd rather have Hugh Greenwood than Christian Petracca?
As a fantasy player? Yes,
wow.
I would this year.
Okay.
100%.
This year, yeah. Look, I think in the keeper league, Petracca, you've got to. Look, I know the weekend was mental, and it's not going to happen every week. But the potential is there that he has a midfield spot, a full-time midfield spot this year. If he takes that, I reckon he'll score pretty damn well. So again, I don't think it's fake news, but I think it's just a bit overhyped at the moment, and we need to watch another game. I reckon that's the best way to put it.
And then you can all be disappointed and you wish you sold him like I told you to.
Well, the thing is, last year we looked at Brayshaw, who was getting 150 every Marsh Series game, then played on a wing and did nothing for the whole year. So there is history there at Melbourne. Anyway, let's stop talking about Petracca in every question, and we'll wrap this show up.
Thank God they're not playing this week, so we won't get any Petracca questions
that'd be great. There's a lot of hype about Petracca, isn't there? Anyway, we're wrapping up now. So make sure you check out our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the description. All the membership stuff's in the description as well if you want to have a look at that sort of stuff there. Next week we'll continue reviewing all of the Marsh Series games, and then was another week. We might even have a look at the All-Stars game if there's any relevance there, but I doubt there will be because there'll be a few too many #2G4P players there.
Everyone basically.
Well, yeah, there's always a few that kind of are on the cusp, like your key forwards, like your Rewalts and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. And then there'll be probably a few lockdown defender types as well that are always around the draftable range. So we'll have a look at those. But that's basically it. We'll be back next week to talk about more Marsh Series. Have a good week.
See you guys.